All right, y'all ready?
Yes, sir, we are ready.
I'm going to go ahead and
Please, let's get started.
call us to order and declare that we have a quorum of 6 members present. And it looks like we're going to C1 to receive comments related to, do I need to read that? Comments related to agenda items in the meeting will be heard during consideration of item later in the workshop.
Yes, sir. So that's one of the changes with this latest board update and with the law that just changed in September 1st. So with any board meeting, regular, special, we have to offer the opportunity for citizens wishing to speak to the board on agenda items, the opportunity to do so. And we, as our board operating procedures dictate, we do those at the time when we deliberate them. So
Do we have any cards?
Carrie?
Okay, so that takes us to D1, consideration, discussion, possible action related to 2021 school calendar development process. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. The weather is turning colder and thoughts turn to calendars. And Thanksgiving and Christmas, but that's when we start our work for the next year's instructional calendar. And the individual and the group that leads our work behind the scenes on that, the individual is Dr. Penny Trammell, our Chief Academic Officer, and the group is the District-Wide Educational Improvement Council. So Penny has gotten together with some drafts and worked them through DEIC. What we have for you tonight is just kind of a sharing of where we are with 2 options, and then kind of getting your blessing to move forward with gathering feedback from the community. So with more information on the 2020-2021 calendars, Dr. Trammell.
Good evening. Okay, we'll just get started. Wanted to review the process for everyone. Back in October, a calendar presentation was given to DEIC to help them understand the parameters that we have in creating calendars to propose to the board. Then this month, DEIC actually helped develop calendars, the 2 calendars that you see in front of you. We took 4 calendars to them just to kind of get started. We did a rotation where participants or committee members gave input on the 4. They voted quickly to delete 1, and then that left us 3. At the end of the day, 2 of the calendars, one with major changes and one with a couple of changes, are what you see in front of you. And then our hope is to post these for public input, and then in December, we will review that input and possibly January before the January board meeting and make any tweaks to the calendar or calendars. Hopefully we can just bring one to the board that we see need to be made as a result of input, and then bring that before you all in January for approval so that people can plan their vacations and get settled for the coming year.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the 2 calendars?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You have a whole presentation, don't you?
Yeah, I do. It's okay. All right. Just a reminder that we do have to have 75,600 minutes of operational time as a result of Update 111, and that the provision requiring the school day to be a certain length of time was removed. With District of Innovation, we can begin school prior to the 4th Monday of August, and we may end prior to May 15th. Other things to consider before we really study them or look at them are, we always like for our kids to take their final exams before winter break. We like to get out before Memorial Day. We like a 2-week winter
June
break.
1st.
Or June 1st.
Yes.
Thank you. We want a spring break. We want some kind of break at Thanksgiving. We usually have Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a holiday. Good Friday as a holiday or Weather Day, and we like to have high school graduation before the holiday in May if we can. Can't always do that. And then we generally have conferences or something around Columbus Day. You'll see 2 additional things on there that we'll talk about in a minute after we share calendars. House Bill 3 reading practices. They're calling them reading academies, and so I want you all to have the context of that because that did influence the calendars that you see in front of you, and then additional trainings. And I've actually taken some slides from a presentation Jeff Mann did on the additional professional learning requirements that the state is requiring of our teachers and administrators, and included them in the Reading Academies slide so that you get a full context of what the expectations are as a result of House Bill 3 this coming year and Update 114. So if you look at, I'm sorry, it's right here.
You look on the
Not in
left.
the reading, like as you look. The current training required, these are mandatory trainings like bloodborne pathogens, child find, bullying, those kinds of things, is around 10 hours of mandatory training when staff members come back at the beginning of the school year. As a result of current legislation, they are adding 6 to 8 additional hours for grades 4 through 12 to that 10. Then, as a result of the Reading Academies, they are adding around 66 to 68 hours for administrators or principals and all teachers at grades K through 3. So what that is 10 days of professional learning over reading, and I'll talk about that with you.
That's item 2 for discussion tonight at the workshop.
Yeah, I'll review that a little bit with you too. So as you can see, there's quite a demand by the state, and it's not optional. We have to meet this criteria. So thought went into the calendars and consideration of this as you see what's in front of you. These are just a few of the trainings. You'll see on the left the existing trainings, and then you'll see on the right the additional trainings that are required. And that doesn't include specialized trainings for special groups. This is just the masses. Okay? And then you will see the 2 calendars before you, Calendar A and Calendar B. There are some things that are a little bit different this year, especially on Calendar A. You'll notice that the first big difference that you'll probably notice is in October, we do have 2 professional learning days. One would be an elementary conference day, and one would be a professional learning day for elementary, and then 2 professional learning days for secondary, and then 3 holidays. That is based on feedback from teachers and teachers at DEIC that said October is very, very difficult. It's a long time from Labor Day to Thanksgiving, and they would like to try and see if we could have some kind of fall break. And so what we did was we bumped the elementary conference day and the professional learning day, and then we added 3 days as a holiday. And you'll notice that affected Thanksgiving because you can't squeeze blood from a turnip, right? There are only so many days. And so we did take those 2 days at the beginning of the Thanksgiving week, which is kind of reverting back to what we've had in years past. And then early release on December the 18th, so people can travel to get to where they need to be for the winter holiday. And then a professional learning day for teachers to plan and get ready for second semester when they come back.
On January 5th.
On January the 5th, correct. February, those would be, that will be right after our mid-year MAP administration. So those will be data review and planning and curriculum. And then we have spring break, and this is the inside word on when A&M is having their spring break. So that's aligned to A&M. Good Friday. And then early release on the 27th, professional learning and graduation on the 28th. So that's Calendar A.
Graduation for the 2 comprehensive high schools again.
Thank you, the
College U would be the
2
day
comprehensive high schools. Thank you for that detail. All right, so option B, you'll notice a shorter first week for kids, 4 days. Not as many professional learning days for teachers up front. This calendar has 6. The previous Calendar A had 7.
How many do we have this year?
We have 5 this year. So both of these have more than we had this year. Okay. Labor Day, the traditional Columbus Day, the 12th, with Friday, the 9th, as a professional learning day as well.
Can you talk about why we didn't have those Monday, Tuesday, and went to Friday, Monday?
So we have testing at the high school on the 14th, and they preferred not to come back day one and have testing if we had October 12th and 13th like we did this year. So we took that second day and backed it up to Friday. So that's the logic behind that. And then a week at Thanksgiving, relatively the same winter break. January 4th is a comp day instead of a holiday. Martin Luther King Jr. off. There's a comp day on February the 15th, and then a staff development day on the 16th. Spring break, Good Friday, and again, we get out at the same time.
Can you just remind everybody what a comp day is and what employees have to do?
So a comp day allows people to do professional learning when it's not a school day or after school hours. And with the reading academies and the amount of professional learning that is going to be required, we felt like it might be a good idea to have a few comp days in the calendar so that teachers can work through modules, upload artifacts, do whatever they needed to do on, from home or somewhere. So we would have a digital record of their participation in the modules and that kind of thing. So more like the private sector. My husband does professional learning online, and they track that. So that is the thinking behind that. Regardless of if we have comp days or just straight up staff development days, we intend to leverage these days as best we can to help with some of the training requirements that have been put on the school district.
Could you refresh my memory on the Thanksgiving? This is our first or second year that we've had the whole week off.
Did we do it the first year I came?
Honestly, I don't know.
It's the second. Yeah, I think I lost the battle the first one. So it's the second year. Clark is a calendar pro. Yeah. So this is the second year. He can make a calendar in his sleep. So it is a gift. So this is our second year to have a calendar with a full week. I think we had a mix last year as well. I think people got to vote on two different options. And so this is no different than last year, and people will be able to vote on the two different options.
As well as provide open-ended feedback, about some of these days or comp days versus traditional staff development days. And we certainly look forward to getting that feedback. Just remember, there's 187-day teachers, and most of our campus staff are on 187-day contracts. So 187 for teachers with 174 student days and 13 days of staff development on both of the calendars.
Right.
You originally said there were 4, and then one automatically lost itself pretty quick.
Yeah.
Was there?
Calendar C got voted off right away.
Was on the other one that got taken off, was it very similar to this? Or
B and D were very close.
Okay.
And so there was only a day or so difference. And so we, as a group, decided which one we're going to go with. And that's why we have the updated B.
So they took what they liked from D, and we tweaked it and put it in B.
So I'm going to say that this group worked really hard last Wednesday, and they stayed quite a bit longer than normal, even to hash this out. And there was not the fall break was not on a suggested calendar originally. That completely came from teacher suggestion. To try that and see what people thought about that. So they worked really hard. My question is, on calendar A, we don't have any comp days.
Correct.
We don't.
Okay.
But we still have the 13 professional learning days. So when we say calendar A and B have 13, B just has some comp, and A just has straight up here in the district professional learning.
So that's.
Can you help me understand the benefits differences between?
So we think about it with reading academies and the additional professional development requirements that we have. If you look at calendar A, which has no comp days, it would be incumbent upon us to provide some of those training days during the professional learning days that we have, since we have them during the school year. And that's one of the challenges ahead of Mr. Mann, is to put together a scope and sequence for all of the trainings. We can't do all of this in August before we start. So what are we going to do in August? What are we going to do in October, in January, and in February? And so those days are fairly provided for in option A. If you look at option B that has the comp days, that's more of a, we're going to ask you to get this done either on that day, you can come to school or work that day, or get it done on your own time, and you can turn that in for a day of not having to be here because you did that while you were off contract. So I think that is another thing that we'll get a lot of feedback from the community and from our teachers especially on as to what their preference is for that. Mm-hmm. But even if we do have the 2 comp days, we have, as you saw, and you will see in item 2 here, a tremendous number of requirements for professional development.
Just a quick question, because I know we'll get good feedback from the community and from teachers, as we always do, but I think the community is going to look at this and they probably won't think through the comp day aspect of it. But your calendar A was, I don't want to say it was the teacher's recommendation, but that was part of it, or was it?
It is the calendar that changed.
I wouldn't say that there was any leader in the clubhouse. Okay. It was, calendar A was novel because the idea came from a teacher, one of our elementary teachers said, why don't we try this? Other districts are doing it. So we figured out how could we do that, and we worked it around. Nobody's gave a hand raise if they were leaning one way or the other, and I couldn't get a sense in the room that anybody preferred either one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there discussion, because the fall break is something new that we've never done before, was there discussion around, we've received feedback before on like childcare issues by having another week off, in October, and then we have part of, Thanksgiving. Was there any discussion regarding that?
There was not on Wednesday, but I would imagine that we'll get some feedback related to that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So basically how we were able to do that was we were able to make 2 days during the week of Thanksgiving, a day of days of instruction, and start 1 day earlier on Monday. That's how we traded in the 3 days. So it's still 3 days versus 3 days. It's just some of them are bunched right together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that calendar A with the fall break, talking about childcare, would Kids Club be able to continue their program during that week?
And my understanding is we do that on the days that we have professional development, but that's something that we will work on and look at.
Yeah.
Technically, 3 of those days are considered holidays, right? So we don't offer childcare during holidays. So it's just something to.
So, something to consider.
Are we to the end of the presentation?
We are to the end.
So our what we look for from the board is not a vote or anything, but if there's something you can't live with on here, now's the time to know.
Yep.
So we can backtrack. So
Before we post them for input.
so we have a comfort level with at least trying the fall break idea and see how it works. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Right, that takes us to, thank you, D2, consideration discussion related to K through 3 reading academies. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, President Harris and members of the board. We alluded to this in our last presentation about the new requirements for reading academies for grades for teachers and administrators grades K through 3. It's a part of a larger set of requirements that the board's going to have to play a large role in, actually, as we move through this year. But we wanted to talk with you and further unpack reading academies and kind of what our options are. We're not looking for any type of action tonight. I must give this caveat that we will give you the information that we have been in receipt of as of November the 19th at 5:20, because things change on this. This is a huge, I underline huge undertaking when you think of all, not just all English teachers or all reading teachers, but all teachers, grades K through 3, and elementary administrators in the state of Texas to be trained in reading academies. So the state is working through making decisions on this, and some of our information does change. But we wanted to, since this will be a big consideration for us over the next few years, especially next year, we wanted to give you some information on it this evening. So with that, Dr. Trammell.
Okay, so here we go. So essentially, the state has, as Clark said, a huge reading initiative. And House Bill 3 addresses reading in two main areas. One, the bill says that all K through 3 teachers and principals will have to attend the reading academies. And then it says that the district must give 3 assurances. And the 3 assurances are that we provide a phonics curriculum using systematic direct instruction in K3, that we prioritize highly effective teachers, placement of those teachers in K2, and that we have integrated reading instruments to support pre-K to grade 3 students. Right now, as the state, this is the major plan by the state, and you can look and notice that it goes all the way up through 8th grade. Right now, when anyone talks about reading academies, they are only talking about K3, because that's the total focus right now. So having these things on the chart from the state tells us that something's coming, but we don't know when. The bill says that candidates seeking certification after.
So we don't know when or what it's going to be.
Correct.
So, because they're not even suggesting what it might be at this point.
No,
Or how much it will cost?
there is no information on,
It's going to take.
right, so there's no information on grades 4 through 8, except just, we know
Just
it's coming.
statutory references there.
Right. So teachers who get certified after January 2021 will have to take the Science of Teaching Reading exam and pass it to get their certification. If they have a certification that falls within teaching children in that realm. And then if you'll notice at the bottom, all K through 3 teachers have to go through the reading academies. Even if they take that Science of Teaching Reading exam, they're still not done. The state says they have to go through the academies. So with that, we know that we have to train all of our current teachers, and then we have to onboard all teachers in the future until the state says you don't have to do that anymore. So it's a continuous process. There are basically 4 domains in the reading academies. The pedagogy, the reading development, which is foundational skills, phonics, that kind of stuff, comprehension, and then analysis and response as you read. There are 2 models right now, but I will tell you they're releasing another video. One thing we received from Region 6 said November 22nd. I talked with a person today at the Future Ready, or the TPAC, and she's on the advisory council, and she said that the new video will be released the 21st as of her meeting last week. So it'll be this Thursday or Friday.
Do we still anticipate there'll be 2 models, comprehensive and blended, or any changes to that?
No, there is rumors of a 3rd option. So right now, these are the 2 models. Both of them have 10 days of training. We have calculated, we have around 350 teachers and administrators who are going to need this training right now. And then projected is highlighted because these are the projected cost, $300 to $500 a person for the blended model, $3,000 to $5,000 a person for the comprehensive model.
I'm going to jump in right here and say, the danger you run in putting numbers out before boards in the community is not if you fall in love with the first number, but you remember the first number. And we highlighted, we bolded, projected. We probably should have underlined it and put it in italics as well. These are back of the envelopes wild guesses as to what this is, making a lot of assumptions as to how many new teachers or new staff members would have to be hired to be able to complete this. So we really have no idea what this is going to cost local districts. And since I have the microphone, I will remind the board that the Texas Education Agency and the commissioner is very quick to remind us that we received funding to do this based on House Bill 3. Remember, the basic allotment went up significantly. We had the early reading allotment that went up. We used a lot of that to pay for full-day pre-K, which is one of the things we had to, and then we will need to use some of that allotment for these costs as well. So we are looking at what our options are, and even perhaps even being a provider. So and Dr. Tran will talk about that here in just a little bit.
Okay. So right now, the comprehensive model is face-to-face, and it requires participants to upload artifacts and complete the modules. So it's more of a completion, upload artifacts. The artifacts will be scored. The blended model at this point seems a little more rigorous because not only do you have to upload artifacts, you have to demonstrate mastery of the content. So a little bit different. And this is just a matrix to show you, if you look at kindergarten through third grade, there's pretty much the core training is consistent. Non-core, like the music teacher, the art teacher, the PE teacher, all the ancillary teachers also have to go through these reading academies. However, if you look at this chart, it looks like there's going to be some customization for those individuals. There are 3 levels of delivery. Provider is one. The region service centers, the 20 service centers across the state will all be providers. We know that. We hope, apply to be our own provider, which would be our preference, to have that expertise right here in our district. We feel like we've certainly got the staff to do that, the expertise in our staff. We might have to hire more, we don't know. And then there's a cohort facilitator, which would do the scoring of all the artifacts, face-to-face, some of the face-to-face stuff. And that would require 3 days of training in Austin, and they have to pass a screener. So you can't just say, oh, we want these 2 people to be our trainers. They have to pass a screening, then they have to attend the training. And if they don't pass the screening, they cannot be trainers. And then cohort coaches, they also have to pass a screening. They have the same 3-day training as the facilitators and an additional 2 days of coaching training.
At this point.
At this point, correct.
What's the difference between the coach and the facilitator? The coach can teach facilitators, or?
So the coach coaches the teachers.
Okay.
On, like, through their lessons, through deciding what their artifacts are going to be, you know, if they fail a module.
Gotcha.
Like, how can you reflect on your practice? What do we need to do? That kind of thing.
So then the facilitator is actually delivering the instruction, taking the artifacts, helping them submit the artifacts, grading them. And so, yeah, it is 2 different roles. Can't be done by the same person.
Got it.
Right. Okay. So essentially, our next steps are to create a plan for implementation. We have until the year 2021-22 to get everyone enrolled. So what we have 350 people. That doesn't include who we might hire next year or, you know, from here out. But I'm meeting with the elementary principals on Thursday, and then we've done some pre-thought as a district about, okay, what can this look like to be manageable for us, to where we can ensure that our teachers are going to be able to pass the criteria that they need to pass to be qualified, highly qualified to teach our kids. So we need to determine which model we're going to use, and if they have a third model, that's going to kind of throw a kink in that, and then determine the budget and how we want to pace that, the cohort waves, so how many cohorts do we want to have, and how frequently do we want to start a new one, and then leverage the calendar to minimize the cost, and then plan for implementation and long-range participation and onboarding. So with that, that's just kind of a brief overview.
We'd love to answer any questions and hear your comments. I don't know how much, some of the answers are changing, so we'll give you the best information we have at this point.
I will say that according to the latest update, the state says they will have the cost of the different models by December 3rd. So we'll see.
You said that was brief. That looks a lot different than brief than I've ever seen before.
It's challenging. It will be a leadership challenge for us, and it's going to be challenging for all of our K through 3 teachers to go through all of this training while they're still doing the other things that they have to do.
Well, I know you didn't want us to fall in love with the first number, and just for the record, I didn't.
Okay.
It's a pretty big number.
Well,
Yeah.
and those assume you're not a provider. We don't know if we are a provider. If we are, can we provide services for maybe others that are close to us in the region? Can we charge for that? There's so many variables that's why I almost would strike that from the presentation. We just don't know.
Yeah. If we can be a provider, then it could be that we can offset our cost. And initially, they said you had to have 1,000 teachers. You had to be able to serve 1,000 teachers, and we're a nip under that, but they removed that. It's no longer in writing, so we're going to apply. So we'll see. We'll see what we get.
We assume at this point that we're going to apply.
Well,
it depends on how
if we
the rules
can.
change.
If
What
we
does
can.
what does that application process look like? And
We don't know yet.
you don't know. Okay.
It's not brief.
It's not free. Okay. Got it.
So, and this is not to throw the education agency under the bus, but these additions to House Bill 3 were substantial. And there is somebody said the other day, legislation that keeps on giving, and it is, because we find out about a number of things and requirements that they have, and the agency is having to ramp up very quickly and figure out how to do that with all those teachers across the state.
So this will be required 2020, 2021 school year?
No, it's required starting, you can register as early as spring 2020, this coming spring in a few months. And then the expectation is that you will have the first cohort enrolled and started the summer of 2020.
But then your second cohort has to be at least started by
2021.
2021, 2022, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. So.
So that's this summer that we have to get started
Correct.
this summer.
Correct. So we're going to have to, if we are a provider, then we'll need to get our facilitators, our coaches, they'll have to pass the screening, they'll have to go through the training, all prior to the first cohort starting in the summer.
As you, and Dr. Trammell didn't put the slide in there, but as you look at they break down the days, there's a summer component during the school year with follow-up coaching component and a second summer component. So yes, Mr. Martindale did.
I was going to say, did Mr. Martindale find some money?
Yes, that under the current budget,
I fell in love with the 300.
I did too.
so there will be some overlap that we'll have to work through.
So do we know exactly how different this is from training that the teachers are already doing?
So at the TPAC conference today, the person that I said was on the commissioner's advisory group for this showed me the outline for the reading academies. I have a huge concern because writing, there's 10 modules and writing isn't even talked about in any way until 9 and 10. So if you know reading practice, writing is a part of learning to read when you're working with letters and sounds, and it's just all kind of integrated. And so it's concerning that writing is not mentioned until, it's mostly phonics all the way down. I took a picture. It's on my phone if you want to see it. But it's mostly phonics through the first 8 modules, and then it's writing. So
I'm just fascinated by the whole thing. And it's the only word I can think of to describe it. I'm just going to leave it at that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, any other questions? I leave you speechless. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did like that apple, by the way.
That takes us to item D3, consideration discussion related to TASB Update 114. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, as you know, the Texas Association of School Boards, or TASB, is our policy provider and policy analyst, and works with us anytime we have updates in board policy, both legal and local. We've talked on a number of occasions this evening about House Bill 3 and how comprehensive it is. Most of the TASB updates we give to you, we share with Transmittal. We ask you if you have any questions. There's a few pages of it, maybe 10, 15, 20 pages of them. You can look over those and ask us questions. This one is substantial. I think I used that word earlier for something else, but it's, how many pages?
The actual text,
The actual text?
it's, I believe, 120.
You can turn that on.
Yeah, it's on.
So
Over 100 pages.
So what we wanted to do was spend a little bit of time going through. At your place, you'll have this copy of some of the local policies that we're looking at and legal, and just highlight some of those just so that you're aware of them, because this one is so comprehensive. So with more information on that is Molly Perry, Chief Administrative Officer. Mrs. Perry.
Thank you. So as we've talked about 114 as Superintendent's Cabinet, I think have used the word voluminous even, because this legislative session was so significant in the world of education. The majority of what you see in 114 is directly related to those changes in law. There are, as you may have noticed, some areas that are local changes, which are really a domino effect of the legal changes. And so, of course, in those particular areas, we have more leeway in terms of looking at the particular language and how that fits within our practices. But I, along with Dr. Ely, went through and highlighted some of the things that we thought might be of particular note. And so we thought we would take just a few minutes to go through those. What you'll note on the first page with highlights references early childhood literacy and math proficiency plans and college career and military readiness plans. This is an area that we are continuing to learn more about as the commissioner rules are written, but we do know as a board that those plans will need to be developed and adopted, and we anticipate doing that later this spring because they do need to be in place by the end of the school year. Looking at the next sections, there are increases in board duties, specifically with adoption of the cybersecurity policies, which we are in the process of looking at much more closely this year, along with those plans that I just mentioned. And then in the event that we looked to seek voter approval to adopt an M&O tax rate, we would need to conduct an efficiency audit as a board. There are additional training requirements as well. You'll notice throughout the update references to sexual abuse, human trafficking, and maltreatment of children. Those training requirements include not only our staff, but superintendents as well as board members. And so know that that will be an increase in training requirement on your part as well. We have talked some in the past about electronic communications, and I know we have a lot of practices in place in terms of district emails for communications and things of that nature, but this in statute, Senate Bill 944, does require that information be maintained in the event that we were to have a request. We'd have that easily accessible. We recently updated board operating procedures already in relation to the changes to BED legal and local.
I'm sorry, we're still on the bottom page 2, right? And you did make sure that everybody knows that's for board members as well, not
Yes.
just staff members. Okay.
Staff and board.
Okay.
And the staff reference is later in policy. This is BBI specific to board members. In looking at BED legal and local, we have already gotten ahead of that in terms of the update with board operating procedures. Mentioned at the beginning of the meeting tonight that there was an opportunity for public comment, and it delineates between special meetings, meaning any meeting aside from the regular meeting, along with the regular meeting in terms of public comment and participation. So we should be good at this point in compliance there. On page 4, there are some additional requirements in our district improvement plan. And so as we work to revise that in the spring, you'll notice there are some additional components related to things like trauma-informed care. We do have to list law enforcement duties in our district improvement plan, as well as our student code of conduct, which is later in the policy. And again, a policy related to sexual abuse, sex trafficking, and maltreatment of children will be included in the DIP, or the district improvement plan, in the future. On page 5, in the event that if and when we should issue a bond in the future, there are some additional requirements surrounding that, and so we would certainly be looking at those in more detail at that point. On page 7, there were significant revisions to requirements related to emergency plans, much of which was included in Senate Bill 11. And so we are really working through this piece by piece, because we have to ensure that the content of those plans is appropriate to what's required by law and what we need as a district to ensure the safety of our students. But there are increased requirements also for notice, as well as submission of that plan to the Texas School Safety Center, which is associated with Texas State. Then on page 8, along with those safety lines, we do have to have traumatic injury response protocols. And you may recall recently we talked about Stop the Bleed and training for our students. We have increased training requirements also for our security personnel and other district personnel that might need to use those. And so those requirements are being moved forward with at this point. With CKE local, also on page 8, we do have to delineate those duties of our school resource officers, or for us, our school deputies. That information is outlined in our ILA, which we'll be looking at the regularly scheduled meeting this evening. Then on page 10, there are a number of new posting requirements, and so we are working through to ensure that we're compliant with all of those on our website. On page 11, again, cybersecurity is referenced in relation to both Senate Bill 820 and House Bill 3834. We have to have not only a policy, but a cybersecurity coordinator designated, and that is David Hutchison, our Director of Technology. Congratulations. And we also have to provide training, which you'll see in a moment. There's a list of increased training requirements. This particular training is very specific, and it comes from an approved list from the state. Then on page 12, TEA has created a registry, or they're in the process of creating that registry, of do not hire individuals. And so we have to, in the event that we were considering somebody that is on that registry, refuse to hire that person. And that's related to investigation and findings of inappropriate relationships primarily. On the bottom of page 12, under DEAA Legal, looks at an optional teacher designation system. This teacher incentive allotment is something that we have begun discussions about and are going to have several folks attend a training to learn more about what this could potentially look like. In this system, teachers could receive designations of master, exemplary, or recognized, and there would be financial components associated with those designations that could go either to that specific teacher or to the entire campus at which they work. Whether we determine that this is a program we want to participate in or not, we're going to need to have conversations, because we could certainly hire teachers that have those designations, because it becomes part of their certification for 5 years once they have received those. So there will certainly be more discussion about that in the future as well. On page 14, as highlighted by Dr. Trammell in the calendar conversation, there's a listing you can see of all of the new staff development requirements that have been included in various legislations under our professional development in DMA Legal. Then on page 15, we've got some revisions to health curriculum related to mental health, and the duties of our SHAC, or our School Health Advisory Committee, have been expanded and clarified. We also are required to adopt a character education program. On page 16, you just heard a lot about, or at least a lot about what we know so far, related to our K-3 reading academies and requirements. At the bottom of page 16, EHBB, legal and local, that policy is related to our gifted and talented students. The state recently updated the Texas State Plan for the education of the gifted and talented students, and we have to adopt policy ensuring that we're using our funds to support that program and that we are in compliance with the state plan. On page 17, there's some information related to compensatory and accelerated services. We now have to provide TEA information regarding our residential census block, and so that information will be used to calculate compensatory education allotments. So again, related back to funding. Additionally, under EHBC, the definition of students who are considered at risk has been expanded to now include 2 new indicators. So there are now 14 ways that students can be identified as at risk. At the bottom of page 17, the requirement for full-day pre-K is outlined, which, as you all well know, we have been working to implement this school year. We'll flip a couple of pages to 20. FFAA local relates to UIL rules regarding participation in marching band and having a physical, which we've already been in compliance with. Our students all have been required to receive those physicals. There also can be designation for additional programs should we see a need for that as well. We also have to, under FFAF legal, make sure that our policy on food allergies is in alignment with the Texas Department of State Health Services guidelines for the care of students with food allergies at risk for anaphylaxis. Say that 3 times really fast. And then looking at crisis intervention, again, Senate Bill 11, very heavy emphasis upon safety. And we're seeing that across multiple policies in FFB local. We're looking at threat assessment and ensuring that we have teams in place to conduct those threat assessments appropriately. And so we'll be attending training to ensure that our practice is aligned with the required Texas School Safety Center as well. We also, under Senate Bill 11 and FFBA legal, must adopt and implement policy related to trauma-informed care practices. So not only is this an additional training requirement, but we will have policy in place that would also increase parent awareness. This information will also be included in the district improvement plan. Page 23, just for your awareness, there are some changes related to student discipline. These were already updated in the Student Code of Conduct that you all adopted prior to the start of the 1920 school year. And so you can see there are some additional considerations related to student discipline. And on page 24, as I mentioned earlier, the maintenance of information on private devices must be transferred to be preserved. This is the staff component. All right. With that, I'd be happy to discuss any of these areas in more detail or gather information prior to our discussion next month. Should you have other questions or concerns?
Our plan at this point is to take it for your approval at the regularly scheduled meeting in December. So we still have a little bit of time. If we need to push it off and we need more information, we can certainly do that. But
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
On page 17, on EHBC legal, could you explain more what this means to provide TEA each student's residential census block, which will be factored in compensatory education?
Sure. So compensatory education has been, prior to the school funding formula that was enacted this legislative session, it was done primarily on the percentage of students who are on free and reduced lunch or economically disadvantaged in a district.
Okay.
So you have a certain number, a certain percentage, and you get funded on that.
Okay.
Part of what House Bill 3 was very targeted in doing was not just looking at the overall number, but the concentrations of poverty within a school system and within an area. So what we have to do now is we look at all the census block data inside our 102 square miles that is College Station ISD, and we have a number of them, and they have different ranges of percentage of kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch, from 0 to 100. And so then we get reimbursed. Actually, even on the least economically disadvantaged census, we're still getting a little bit more money than we did last time. So it's graduated up. The more concentrated the level of poverty in a particular area, the more money that you will receive in compensatory ed funding.
Okay.
And so that is how they calculate it now, and that's the reason why. So really looking at concentrated areas of poverty.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to D4, consideration and discussion related to opening participation for non-resident students for certain career tech programs only at College View High School. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. This is not an action item this evening. We're furthering our conversation about the fire science program at College View High School. As you recall, we came to you in October and just threw an idea out on the table, asking the question, is there a way that we could help out neighboring districts and students in those districts by offering the opportunity to participate in our fire science program? We have a great partnership with TEEX, Texas Extension Service, and the Braden Fire School. So we appreciate their work with our students. And we know that we have a little bit of capacity in that program, and the capacity that we have in the program probably outdistanced the amount of interest that we might have just inside of College Station ISD. So we threw a couple ideas out on the table last month. One would be to work with a memorandum of understanding with other districts who would be interested in a program, and the other one would be to change board policy and look at opening up limited open enrollment only for the purposes of Fire Science Academy and only at College View High School. So Mr. Martindale has done some research on this and has some information in regards to those two options, and we'd love to have any more conversation you want to have and other options that might come up. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. I sat down with Mr. Grimes and we've kind of just brainstormed different considerations if provided the opportunity to open this to students outside of the school district, those particular avenues, and then what might be the implications of each of those or the different avenues that this might be possible. First, as we look to next year to 2020-21, currently the Fire Science Academy is, he started a couple of years ago as a 4-year program. I know Mr. Grimes is working with TEEX right now and the instructor, and they're going to condense that and make it a 2-year program beginning next year. And the rationale behind that is, as a 4-year program, kids are making that decision to participate or not as a freshman. So you're eliminating really any room for error as far as them becoming a part of the program if they're not in it as soon as they start high school. The rationale for moving...
Really 8th grade though, right?
Well, it's true. They would be enrolling at the end of their 8th grade year for their 9th grade classes. So they are working to transition that to a 2-year program. That at least opens the window for as late as when they're considering junior year classes. So that is occurring with the students he has now and would be what we're looking at. I just kind of want to frame that as we look at the possibilities to further the conversation. On program capacity, and I'll just start at the first row and work our way across. With limited open enrollment, or whether we use a memorandum of understanding or an ILA, our program capacity is going to be the same. He'd be looking at 36 total students, 18 per level. So for year 1, he has capacity for 18 students. In year 2, he has capacity for 18 students. So again, a total of 30. There's 4 currently in the program. So next year, if this was considered your year 2, you probably only have 4 kids. You'd really be looking at tapping in to that interest for year 1 students next year. Of course, our students, again, and I'll preface this, I believe Mr. Harris asked this question last time. Of course, College Station ISD students will be given priority. Fill up as many seats as our kids will be interested. If there are any seats remaining after that, that's when you would consider LOE or an MOU to fill the remaining seats.
So at the end of the day, they would not be able to, if they made their decision in 8th grade, that would be 9th and 10th, or they could do 10th and 11th,
Absolutely.
or they could do 11th and 12th. But
They could
at that
start as
point,
late.
The senior year, you'd still have to,
Correct. They wouldn't be able to grab both years of the program. So they could decide as entering into their junior year, which again provides them an additional 2 years to
Figure out
maybe
what they want to do.
gauge what they're more interested in as they get a few years older. As far as attendance, under limited open enrollment, those students would actually be enrolled as students of College Station ISD at Campus 004, which is College View High School. They would in essence become our students under limited open enrollment. If we entered into an MOU with another district or an ILA, those students would remain enrolled and be students of the other district, but they would just simply come over and participate in that class for us. And I'll address this here at attendance and again at scheduling. This is where things can probably get a little bit complicated for us. If they come over from a neighboring district, at College View, Mr. Grimes, those folks are on a block schedule, an alternating block. So they have 4 classes a day at 85 minutes. Monday would be your odds, like 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th. Mondays and Wednesdays, and Tuesdays and Thursdays would be their even numbered classes, 2, 4, 6, 8. Friday, he does a blended version and sees everybody for 15 minutes, so to speak. The traditional comprehensive high schools in our area, Bryan, Rudder, even CSHS and Consol are on a traditional 7 or 8 period day. So those classes are 15 minutes. So if we're under MOU, they remain student at another district. They come over for this class, which would be offered on a daily basis for 85 minutes because we're double blocking these. So they would in essence meet every day for 85 minutes. With the exception, of course, Friday, which would be 50 minutes.
No, it'd be the 2 classes they would meet because it'd double up.
Sure, be first and second period.
Or
Still
third and fourth or
85
whatever.
minutes, or it'd be 2 periods on Friday. There will be some logistics as far as syncing up those schedules because what a student would be looking at would be investing 2 of their class periods at a traditional schedule at high school for this 1 class at College View. Then you're going to have implications with travel time. And I kind of compared the schedules of the comprehensive schools relative to College View. There would be 15 or 20 minutes, the ending of that class period, to get back for 3rd period. And I'm not sure that you could pull that off on a regular, consistent basis. And it really depends on where they're traveling to. It'd be very limited to get them back in time. So very much a kid would be looking at giving 3 periods of their traditional day if they're coming over for this one particular class.
So I'm just going to jump in here real quick and compare it a little bit to the Bryan CTE Center, the Regional Career and Technical Education Center. I had that great opportunity to go and with Mrs. Hester and a number of campus folks and do a tour over that over there last couple of weeks. At any rate, they are already operating with MOUs with outside districts. As you know, we're going to participate with them next year, but they're currently working with Snook and Caldwell ISDs. And so they offer a couple of class periods over there, and it's a half-day program. But based on one of those sending schools having a little bit earlier start time, it's forcing them in the morning round for the CTE Center to start a little earlier. That's one of the things that we can look at, and the great thing about having a small campus like College View is the flexibility and being able to try to work with those districts to the extent that we can to modify our schedule and modify their schedule to meet their needs.
From a funding standpoint, if they are in essence enrolled in our school district, we receive the funding accordingly for a CAPE program, just like we would at our schools now. So we would receive the funding. It'd be directly tied to our state funding template that is provided through this foundation payment. If we're receiving through an MOU, where those students are enrolled, the district that they are enrolled in receives that funding, and we would have to formulate some type of tuition based on cost of the class that we may be incurring, also something relative to the weighting funding that their district would be receiving. So there would be a tuition-based cost if they're visiting for that single period. Transportation, we really have no obligation in either situation from a transportation standpoint. It'd be their own responsibility to handle their transportation under limit to open enrollment. Under an MOU, which typically see is the sending district providing some type of transportation for those students that are participating. Scheduling.
Did Brian, CTE, explain how do they explain how they're doing with their
Transportation?
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, they provide buses that go to Bryan High and to Rudder High School. Currently, because of the way Bryan Collegiate works, they can't make that work for kids from Bryan Collegiate. They also run buses from Snook, and I believe one of the sending districts allow their kids to drive. I cannot remember which one it is. So they work those details out.
From a scheduling standpoint, I kind of touched on this when I was speaking to attendance. If they are full-time students, it's a 2-year program. They're double block classes, 85 minutes every day. And really that could be managed within the master schedule at College View High School. It'd be like scheduling any other student, really. Provide some flexibility, and Mr. Grimes can make those adjustments within the system itself to meet those needs. Again, if they're coming from another district, there will be some implications as far as scheduling. It's possible. It would be complicated because the traditional high schools are on a 7 to 8 period day, so their bell schedule is a little bit different. You have to account for travel time. Also, they're giving up 3 periods, and in this particular situation, we'd be offering 3 credits. We need to work through some logistics as far as could that student allow for giving up that 3rd period credit, which they in essence would be doing.
On scheduling, we don't know if we went the MOU ILA route. We don't know exactly what that would look like, but the way it works at the Bryan CTE Center is that the students, a lot of students have to have transportation provided them to school. And so they will take their regular bus to their comprehensive high school, their sending high school, then they will get on a transfer bus to come over to the CTE Center. So it doesn't start right as the school day starts. It starts a little bit later. So you have to look at the times from those schedules and how long it would take them to get there to kind of work all that out. They have the CTE Center can go up to 3 different blocks of time, basically first in the morning, around the middle of the day, and the end of the day. Right now, their end of the day block does the same thing. They send their kids back before the end of the school day so they can be on their sending campus and ride their transportation home. So those are all those details we would have to work out if we want to go forward with this and we want to go with the MOU route.
What type of for the graduation credits that could be missed for transportation, what are some of the options that would be available to them? Because if they're using transportation time instead of being in the classroom,
it's still about 3 periods a day that they would be missing at school, at their sending school, and they would be getting the way we're envisioning it right now, they would be getting 2 credits each of their years, junior year and senior year. And so they should have, hopefully, enough slack in their schedule to be able to accommodate that. We're still early in this process. One of the things is I keep going back to CTE Center, and I appreciate Dr. Whitbeck and David Reynolds and those folks who allowed us to come over there. But one of the things that they do in their program is they provide a science course for their kids who are there. That is a state it's a state credited course. So they're getting a technical dual credit course there, and they're also getting a science credit. So they don't offer English and math, at least currently. So that's also something that we could look at, perhaps having an academic course perhaps linked with it. Our issue, again, goes back to our scheduling. With 85-minute class periods, we don't have a lot of slack in the schedule to be able to provide that. So.
And at the comprehensive high school, if they're able to acquire 7 or 8 credits per year and the number of credits required for graduation, they would need to look at that to see if there's room in the amount of credits they can earn relative to their graduation requirements to sacrifice a period, is in essence. For example, if they can acquire 8 a year, they can get 32, but 28 are required for graduation. So that would have to be looked at on an individual basis and really relative to the sending district. And what Dr. Ely is speaking of, they tie that 3rd credit in through a core, by linking a core class to the CTE. So that way it's helping kids accommodate for losing that credit and then using that transportation time more linked around lunch. So they basically spend a half day. Policy implications for limited open enrollment would require an adjustment to FDA local to allow non-resident students to attend College View High School.
In the fire science program.
And specifically in the fire science program. And MOU or interlocal agreement, I'd go an MOU route. Then we would just enter into that arrangement with every district that would be interested in allowing their students to participate in the program. So we're just really trying to organize our thoughts and write down plus and minuses, begin to try to see what this might look like so that we can kind of see if we continue with the conversation, continue to explore or not, but just again, begin trying to provide some organization as far as our thoughts.
And so we would love if you had some questions or would like for us to look at some data and bring it back to y'all next month. If you think of it now, that's great. We can write that down and do it. If you're thinking about it over the next couple of weeks, those of you who will remain on the board, then please go ahead and you can get that information to me and we can work it through Mr. Martindale. But right now, does anybody have any questions or comments or requests for information?
I have a horrible question. Just for you,
great
Mr.
preference.
Harris. So if we open it up and someone from Anderson or Snook or Iola, we've got plenty of room in this, we've got 18 spots and they come on over and whether it's limited open enrollment or we do the memorandum of understanding, we've still got room. What if there is a young man or young lady at Consol or CSHS who would want to, hey, I'd like to go over there for that, but I also want to stay here for the,
So under limited open enrollment, we would go with our policy right now, which is
you
if
go
you go to College View, you go to College View.
Okay.
And that is actually something we talked about a little bit at our morning meeting.
So it's not a completely stupid question.
No, it's a very prescient question, Mr. Nugent. That is something we would have to look at. I mean, the intent in building our choice high school was it as a choice. Mm-hmm. You go to a comprehensive high school or you go to our choice high school. And we would have to have those conversations of, do we provide that opportunity to transfer back and forth for non-resident students and not allow that for our students at Consol and College Station High School, or would we? I think that's just further conversation for us to have if we go that direction.
Fair enough.
That was a great question. And I had a question too. When you had your conversations with superintendents from other school districts, did y'all chat about any of this as well?
We talked a little bit about, yes. So we talked about the possibility, we talked about starting the discussion in October, so they weren't caught flat-footed.
Right.
And we talked about, the possibility of limited open enrollment and what that might look like. We also talked about the possibility of a memorandum of understanding. Almost to a person, the 7 or 8 folks that I talked to were applauded the school district for thinking about opening this program up in some way and thinking that there might be a few kids at their district who might be interested. And nobody thought that we were going to be emptying out their district of kids coming over to be a part of fire science. I was very quick to say that if we went the limited open enrollment route, it wouldn't be where they would come over to do the fire science program in the morning, and then they would go to one of our comprehensive high schools to, play basketball or be in the band or anything like that. They would be students at College View. One local superintendent said, is there a way you can make it half day? And talked about what I did earlier with what Bryan CTE does by offering that science program, and asked us to look at that. And that's obviously something we are looking at.
So there was no preference one way or the other?
Well, I mean, if you ask a superintendent, they're going to want to keep their funding. They're going to want to keep
even
the
with
MOU.
even with the added fee.
Well, we don't know what that.
Right.
We haven't even talked about what that would be. But for a school district, it's more advantageous to keep your kids enrolled in your school district, and you keep that ADA.
Are we, and this may be a goofy question, but are we at risk of losing this program if we don't get more students involved?
We've not had that discussion with
Okay.
Chief Almanza or with Harvey Cheshire at this point. Our point, we've had, I think we had a few more kids in it last year. What we know is we got 36. Even if we had 10 in there, we still have capacity.
Right.
So what the genesis of this conversation is, how can we provide more opportunities for other people in our region?
Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, then with that, I guess we are adjourned.